Sorry, I didn't mean to, Oliver said, red-faced, as Ethan awkwardly climbed off him. Ethan smiled, his eyes twinkling as he brushed snow off his coat. Don't worry. I think I might have fallen for you anyway. Their story is a mix of snow, live-streamed moments, and a growing connection neither of them saw coming. Unexpected encounter at Aspen. It all started with a fall. Oliver Hayes had never been one for adventure, especially not the kind that involved steep slopes and freezing temperatures. But there he was, standing at the edge of Aspen, Colorado, with a backpack full of hopes and a heart full of uncertainty. He had heard so much about the thrill of skiing, the rush of flying down the mountainside, and the beauty of the snow-capped peaks, and for once, he wanted to experience it all. But he had no idea that Aspen would give him far more than just a winter vacation. Oliver was from the deep south, where snow was a rare visitor, and skiing was something people only did in movies. He had always preferred the warmth of the sun and the comfort of familiarity, but something about Aspen's towering mountains and fresh powder made him feel like he needed to break free from his quiet, predictable life. He'd never been much of an extrovert either, preferring to keep to himself and share his thoughts and experiences with the world through his live streams. He had a small but dedicated following who enjoyed his laid-back style and the simplicity of his southern charm. But today, he was ready to step out of his comfort zone. As Oliver entered the Aspen airport, the cold air hit him like a slap in the face. He adjusted the camera on his phone, setting it to live stream his experience for his audience. The airport was bustling with travelers heading to the slopes, families with kids bundled up in oversized jackets, and couples sharing quiet moments in the warm waiting areas. He grinned at the idea of sharing this first-time adventure, even though a part of him felt like an outsider. This was the first time he was going to attempt skiing, and he wasn't sure what to expect, but he was determined to make the best of it. He had just stepped off the escalator, trying to gather his bearings, when it happened. In an instant, his foot caught on the icy floor, sending him skidding uncontrollably forward. His arms flailed as he desperately tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. Oliver collided with something, or rather, someone, so hard that he could feel his knees buckle. The next thing he knew, he was on the ground, his body pinned under the weight of a tall figure. "Ugh, sorry, I didn't mean to," Oliver blurted out, his face turning bright red as he tried to sit up. A deep chuckle rumbled from above him, and Oliver found himself staring at a pair of dark brown boots, snow melting from them onto the floor. Looking up, he saw a pair of wide-set, strikingly intense eyes staring back at him. The man above him was tall, way taller than new Oliver, who was already on the taller side for his age. With broad shoulders and an athletic build, the stranger looked like someone who was used to dominating any space he walked into. And now, it seemed he had completely dominated Oliver's personal space. "Oh, this is... not how I imagined my first day in Aspen going," Oliver mumbled, still too flustered to fully process the situation. He wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear, but of course that was impossible, considering the man had practically fallen on top of him. The guy shifted, slowly moving off Oliver's lap, looking slightly apologetic but mostly amused. "It's fine, I'm fine," the man said, offering a hand to help Oliver up. Oliver grabbed it, trying to regain his composure as he stood up, feeling like an absolute fool. He didn't even notice the small crowd that had gathered, mostly other travelers watching the awkward scene unfold. The whole thing was being broadcast live to Oliver's followers on his live stream. "Yeah, I'm good. Thanks," Oliver muttered, his face burning even hotter as the live stream comments began to pour in. He quickly checked his phone, cringing at what was being said. "Dude, your face is the color of a tomato right now. Did that guy just fall on you? Bro, you okay? That looked painful." Plot twist. Ethan is a superhero and saved him. Oliver's stomach twisted with embarrassment, but he couldn't help but laugh awkwardly at the comments. He had a tendency to get a little too flustered when things didn't go according to plan, and this was definitely one of those moments. The guy, who had yet to say his name, stood back up, brushing the snow off his jacket and looking at Oliver with a mix of curiosity and amusement. "Well, looks like you've got quite the audience, huh?" the stranger said, gesturing at Oliver's phone with a smirk. Oliver looked up at him, still trying to make sense of everything. "I'm, live streaming my trip here. Guess I didn't expect this to be the highlight of my day," he said, his voice a little less shaky than before. He tried to joke, but the blush on his face was still impossible to hide. The man smiled, his eyes softening a little. "No worries, man. I think I've definitely made an entrance for both of us." He paused for a moment, almost as if waiting for Oliver to say something more, but when Oliver didn't, he gave a small shrug and began to walk away. "Hey, I didn't catch your name," Oliver called out, still wanting to salvage the situation, though the awkwardness was palpable. The guy turned back slightly, offering him a quick, somewhat sheepish smile. "Ethan. Ethan Davis?" He gave a casual wave before turning around and walking off into the crowd, leaving Oliver standing there, still trying to process what had just happened. Oliver stared after him for a second before his phone buzzed again with more comments. He swiped through the screen, shaking his head. The live stream chat was absolutely on fire. "Is Ethan your new skiing buddy? Wow, what a cute couple. Imagine falling on your first day and meeting someone like him. Can we get a slow-mo replay? Did you see the way he looked at you?" Oliver groaned and sat down on a bench, letting his phone fall into his lap. He had just made a fool of himself in front of a crowd of strangers, who now thought he was some kind of love interest for a guy he barely even knew. But then again, his followers had always been playful, and the situation was kind of funny, right? He tried to convince himself that the whole thing was no big deal, but he couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's smile and how effortlessly confident he seemed. Ethan had left in a hurry, clearly embarrassed by the whole thing too. But for some reason, Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't the end. There was something about Ethan that intrigued him, a quiet intensity maybe, or just the way his presence made the air feel a little different. He didn't know yet, but Oliver felt a strange pull toward him, something that felt too big to ignore. For now, Oliver pushed those thoughts aside. He was here for a reason, to experience something new, to get out of his comfort zone, and try something he had never done before. Skiing. It had to be exciting, right? Surely the slopes would be less awkward than this. But deep down, he couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if their paths crossed again? The misunderstandings and tension. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Oliver Hayes woke up the next morning to the sound of soft snow tapping against his window. Aspen, Colorado was still covered in the kind of deep, perfect powder he had only ever seen in movies. The excitement from the previous day's fiasco was still lingering in his mind. He couldn't help but replay the moment when he had literally fallen into Ethan Davis's arms. The way Ethan's deep voice had casually apologized, the way his brown eyes had caught Oliver off guard. Oliver hadn't expected any of it. In fact, he hadn't even expected to think about it again. But here he was, lying in bed, smiling at the thought of a guy he barely knew. Sighing, Oliver decided it was time to go out. The resort had all the snowboarding and skiing lessons he had signed up for, but his followers were still buzzing over his live-streamed falling into the arms of a stranger incident. He couldn't let them down. Plus, he was in Aspen. He had to at least try skiing again, right? Today would be better. Today would be smoother. He suited up in his ski gear, checked his camera to make sure it was charged and ready for another live stream, and made his way to the slopes. The snow was fresh and the air was crisp as he stood at the base of the mountain, feeling both excited and nervous. He wasn't a natural skier, that much was clear, but he was, determined to get the hang of it. What he didn't expect, however, was to see Ethan again. Oliver had just started to gather his courage and slide awkwardly onto his skis when he spotted a familiar figure across the hill. Ethan, the tall, athletic guy who seemed to glide over the snow effortlessly. Ethan was practicing his jumps, his movements smooth and confident, completely in control. He wasn't just skiing, he was flying. The sight made Oliver's stomach flutter a little, but he quickly pushed the feeling away. He wasn't sure if Ethan had noticed him yet, but in the back of his mind, he dreaded the idea of another awkward interaction. Ethan probably didn't want to deal with him again, right? Not after the embarrassing moment yesterday. Oliver took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Maybe if he just stayed out of Ethan's way, everything would be fine. He slid further down the slope, keeping his distance, but no matter how hard he tried, the universe had other plans. "Look out!" Before Oliver even had a chance to react, Ethan was airborne. The tall figure flew into the air with impressive speed, launching off a ramp, only to lose control mid-air. Time seemed to slow as Ethan soared directly toward Oliver. The snow crunched under Ethan's landing, and before Oliver could even blink, the two of them collided with a violent thud. Both of them tumbled into a pile of snow, sliding down the slope together in a tangled mess. Oliver felt his face hit the snow, and Ethan's weight followed, pressing him deeper into the white powder. "I can't catch a break," Oliver muttered, his voice muffled by the snow. The situation felt surreal, so much so that Oliver barely even processed it. The way their bodies had landed on top of each other was awkward enough, but when Ethan rolled off him, trying to get back on his feet, Oliver realized that the whole thing had been caught on his live stream. His phone was still running, broadcasting everything to his followers. The comments on the screen began flooding in. Oliver could practically feel the judgment and amusement coming from his followers. "Dude, this is the second time. Ethan's definitely got a thing for you. Y'all should just kiss already." "Bro, is this your new skiing buddy?" Oliver groaned, his face going bright red as the live stream continued rolling. He tried to get up, but his legs were tangled in his skis. Ethan, looking equally embarrassed, offered him a hand. "You good, man?" Ethan asked, his voice a mix of concern and amusement. Oliver nodded, pushing himself off the snow. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. Not." The two of them stood there, awkwardly looking at each other for a few seconds. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, and Oliver felt his heart race, unsure of what to say. Was this really happening again? Ethan broke the silence. "Look, I'm really sorry about this," he said, offering a small, sheepish smile. "I didn't mean to crash into you. Again." Oliver chuckled nervously. "I mean, at this point I guess it's just fate. I'm starting to think maybe I should stop live streaming everything." The two of them shared an awkward laugh, but the tension didn't fully go away. Despite the light-hearted tone, both of them could feel the underlying tension. It was hard to ignore that there was something unspoken between them. They'd met under the most embarrassing of circumstances, and each time they saw each other, things only seemed to get more awkward. The awkwardness hung in the air as the live stream comments continued to scroll on Oliver's phone. "Okay, now kiss." "Yo, you both are so cute together." "Bro, this is becoming a soap opera. How many times are you going to fall into his arms?" Ethan laughed, clearly embarrassed by the attention. "I don't know how this keeps happening, but I swear I'm not stalking you." Oliver smiled at that, feeling a little lighter. "Yeah, I don't think you're stalking me," he said, his voice a little softer than before. "But maybe we should try to avoid these situations." "Good idea," Ethan replied, his lips curling into a grin. He paused for a second, then added, "I'm really sorry again, though. I think I've ruined your live stream." My followers love it," Oliver said, trying to brush off the awkwardness. But the truth was, he could feel something more than just the usual social media embarrassment. There was an undeniable connection, though neither of them were ready to fully acknowledge it yet. Well, I'll leave you to your live streaming, Ethan said, giving a small wave before starting to ski down the slope. Yeah, see you around, I guess, Oliver muttered, watching Ethan glide away effortlessly. The sight of Ethan's graceful movements made Oliver feel even more self-conscious about his own struggles on the slopes. As Ethan disappeared down the hill, Oliver stood there, still processing the strange encounter. It felt like a weird, funny, and oddly magical moment, and for some reason it stuck with him more than it probably should have. But there was a bigger issue at play. Oliver couldn't ignore that Ethan's presence had started to stir something in him, something he didn't quite understand. It was more than just a simple crush, but it was also more than just two people being thrown together by circumstance. It was confusing. It was frustrating. But mostly, it was real. And Oliver wasn't sure how to handle it, but just like before, he found himself looking forward to whatever would happen next, even if it meant more accidents, more awkward encounters, and more confusion between him and Ethan. The tension between them was thick, and neither of them could seem to find a way to break it. Each time they crossed paths, things seemed to get more complicated, more real. As Oliver skied down the hill, trying to focus on his balance, he couldn't help but wonder. Would he see Ethan again? Would he have the courage to face whatever this was between them? And more importantly, would Ethan feel the same way? The snow continued to fall gently around him, as if the universe was waiting for an answer. But for now, Oliver could only hope. Emotions slowly unveiled. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. After all, Oliver had spent most of the day getting a crash course in skiing, and it was nothing short of chaotic. He was exhausted and sore, but as the sun dipped below the mountains and the resort turned into a peaceful winter wonderland, all he wanted was to unwind. The idea of spending a few hours in the resort's public bathhouse seemed like the perfect way to relax, and maybe clear his head after everything that had happened in the last couple of days. Oliver had been more or less avoiding Ethan, or at least trying to. It was awkward enough running into him at the airport, and then again on the slopes. He wasn't sure what to make of all the tension between them, especially after his followers' comments. People online were definitely reading more into their interactions than Oliver was comfortable with. But as he stepped into the steamy, warm bathhouse, he tried to push all of that aside. He was here to relax and nothing more. The bathhouse was quieter than he expected, with just a few other guests lounging in the hot pools, steam rising from the water in slow waves. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and Oliver immediately felt his muscles begin to relax as he slid into the warm water. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the heat seep into his bones, feeling all the tension from the day melt away. But then, of course, fate had other plans. As he leaned back, Oliver heard a familiar voice behind him. "Well, if it isn't the famous live streamer himself." Oliver froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned his head, and sure enough, there was Ethan. He was standing by the entrance, looking just as relaxed as Oliver had been a second ago. He'd clearly come in to unwind too, and he was wearing nothing but a towel wrapped around his waist, a stark contrast to Oliver's fully clothed appearance. The sight of Ethan's lean body, his shoulders broad and muscles defined, made Oliver momentarily lose his words. "Hey," Oliver said, forcing himself to sit up straight. He felt his cheeks flush again, just from the sight of Ethan standing there with that casual smirk, like it was nothing at all. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I didn't think you'd be the type to chill in a bathhouse, but I guess I was wrong." He stepped closer, his feet making soft slapping sounds against the tiled floor. Oliver swallowed, trying to act normal, though his stomach was doing somersaults. It's actually pretty relaxing. I didn't expect to see you here, though." Ethan chuckled, the sound smooth and deep, and there was something different about the way he said it, something less guarded. "Guess we both needed a break from the slopes." but I didn't expect to run into you of all people." They both fell into a comfortable silence, a little awkward at first, but it wasn't long before the tension began to ease. They were both here to relax, right? Oliver hadn't expected this meeting to be anything other than another weird coincidence. But now that Ethan was here, it felt like, well, like they were both trying to find some kind of peace. For a few minutes, they just sat there in the warm water, neither one of them saying much. Oliver focused on the steam curling around them, trying not to stare at Ethan too much. But even though Ethan was silent, there was an air about him that Oliver couldn't ignore. It was like he was more present than he usually was, less aloof, and yet still. Something in his eyes felt distant, like he was keeping something buried under the surface. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "So you really do live stream all your adventures, huh?" Oliver laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, it's more of a hobby. People like to watch, so I keep doing it. But, I didn't plan on making this a part of the live stream." He gestured vaguely between the two of them. The whole falling over each other thing was not exactly how I wanted to be remembered. Ethan smirked, clearly enjoying the awkwardness. "Well, I don't know. It kind of adds to your charm. And hey, people seem to love it." He leaned back against the edge of the pool, crossing his arms. "It was funny, actually. You didn't seem so sure about skiing at first, but you handled it well." Oliver could feel the tension lifting bit by bit. He allowed himself to relax just a little. "Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I guess I didn't embarrass myself completely." He gave Ethan a hesitant smile, realizing that the usual nerves were fading. There was something about Ethan's casual demeanor that made Oliver feel less self-conscious. There was a beat of silence before Ethan spoke again, his tone a little softer now. "You're different than I thought you'd be." Oliver blinked. "What do you mean?" Ethan shrugged, his gaze drifting towards the steam rising from the water. "I don't know. When we first met, I figured you were quiet, reserved. But now I can see there's more to you than that. You're not as closed off as I thought." Oliver felt a flutter in his chest. He wasn't used to people seeing him that way, especially not someone like Ethan, who seemed so confident and put together. "Well, I'm not exactly the outgoing type," Oliver admitted. "But I'm warm, I guess, just in my own way." Ethan's lips curled up into a small smile. "I can tell." He paused for a moment before adding, "You don't seem so bad to be around. You're not as awkward as you look." The words took Oliver by surprise, and for a moment he wasn't sure how to respond. It wasn't like Ethan was being overly flattering. There was no hidden meaning behind his words. But there was something about Ethan's straightforwardness that made Oliver feel a little lighter, a little more understood. For the first time, Oliver felt like he wasn't just a stranger to Ethan, but maybe someone who could fit into his world, awkwardness and all. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, the water bubbling gently around them. Oliver found himself glancing over at Ethan more than once, his mind racing with thoughts he wasn't sure how to deal with. The warmth between them felt real, but there was still something unspoken hanging in the air. Suddenly Ethan's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Ethan checked it, his expression shifting slightly as he glanced at the screen. "Sorry, I need to take this." He stood up, wrapping the towel around himself more securely, and quickly walked to the side of the bathhouse to answer. Oliver watched him go, a feeling of disappointment creeping in, even though he tried to push it away. Whatever this was between them, it wasn't quite clear yet, but the moment had felt real, and now it was over, just like that. A few minutes passed before Ethan returned, his expression slightly more serious. "That was my dad. He wants me to head back home tonight," he said, sounding a little more distant than before. "Oh," Oliver replied, unsure of what else to say. "Is everything okay?" Ethan nodded. though his eyes seemed to cloud over for a moment. Yeah, just family stuff. Oliver could tell there was more to it, but he didn't push. Well, I guess I'll see you around, he said, trying to sound casual. Yeah, I'll be around, Ethan replied, his smile returning, but this time it seemed more fleeting. Take care, Oliver. With that, Ethan was gone, leaving Oliver sitting in the warm water, the silence suddenly feeling heavier than before. Oliver couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. The connection between them had felt so natural, so easy, but something still lingered beneath the surface. Neither of them was ready to take the next step. Neither of them could admit what was happening, even if it was already starting to feel undeniable. As Oliver sat there, lost in thought, he realized that the emotions between him and Ethan were growing, slowly but surely. Something had shifted, but neither of them were brave enough to name it yet. All they had were fleeting moments, awkward silences, and the distant hope that maybe one day they would figure it out. But for now, Oliver was content to let the connection simmer, because maybe, just maybe, they both needed time to process what was happening between them. Love acknowledged. It was supposed to be just another day in Aspen, but somehow everything felt different. Oliver had spent the last few days navigating the awkwardness that had grown between him and Ethan. It was like an unspoken tension that neither of them had fully addressed, yet it hovered in the background every time they saw each other. The encounters were still awkward, but they were becoming more comfortable, more natural. After all, they had shared so much already. Awkward crashes, quiet moments, and fleeting conversations that hinted at something deeper. Oliver had learned a lot about Ethan over the past few days. Ethan wasn't just the confident, strong guy who seemed to glide effortlessly through life. He had layers that were slowly being peeled away. Behind that calm, almost aloof exterior, Oliver could sense something more fragile, more real. Ethan wasn't perfect, and that made Oliver feel better. He wasn't perfect either. It wasn't long before their interactions started shifting. The tension between them was slowly replaced with something more tangible, a connection that neither could ignore. But while the signs were there, neither of them had put it into words. Neither had dared to admit what was really going on. The turning point came on the 5th day of their trip. It was late afternoon, and the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, casting a warm golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. The two of them had just finished another day on the slopes, though neither of them was particularly good at skiing. They had spent more time laughing at their own clumsiness than actually getting any better. But the fun and ease of the day seemed to soften the edges of their earlier awkwardness. After a quick bite at the resort's cafe, they decided to head back to James Davis's house, where Ethan was staying. It wasn't unusual. Oliver had been over a couple of times to hang out, and James was always friendly, offering them both a cozy place to relax. But today felt different. The air between him and Ethan was charged in a way Oliver couldn't explain, and he felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. When they arrived, James was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Ethan greeted his dad with a quick hug and a few words, and then the two of them went to the living room to unwind. Oliver took a seat on the couch, running his hand through his hair nervously. He was starting to feel like the weight of the unsaid things between him and Ethan was becoming unbearable. The longer they stayed like this, the harder it would be to move past it. Ethan, who had been standing by the window, turned toward him. "Hey, Oliver," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "We need to talk." Oliver's heart skipped a beat. His mouth went dry. "Talk? About what?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper, betraying his nerves. Ethan walked over and sat down next to him, his posture relaxed, but his eyes intense. "About us," he said, finally meeting Oliver's gaze. "I've been meaning to say this for a while now, but I didn't know how." Oliver's stomach churned with a mix of excitement and fear. He could feel the tension building, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Ethan let out a small sigh, then continued. I've had these feelings for you for a while now, and I think it's time I stopped pretending that I don't. I like you, Oliver, more than just a friend, more than just someone I keep running into. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. He blinked, trying to process Ethan's words. Ethan liked him? Really? Ethan, Oliver started, but he trailed off, unsure of how to respond. A million thoughts rushed through his head. He had known there was something between them, but to hear Ethan say it out loud, that was something else entirely. I know this probably sounds crazy, Ethan said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't even know if you feel the same way. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was normal when I've been thinking about you like this. Oliver swallowed hard. I feel the same, but... He paused, unsure if he should voice the reservations that had been hanging over him. We're so different, Ethan. You're you. And I'm just you, Ethan finished for him, his voice soft but firm. Oliver, that's the point. I like you for who you are, not for some idea of who I think you should be. Oliver's heart raced. It was hard to believe that someone like Ethan could really want someone like him. They were from two different worlds, or at least it felt that way. Ethan was outgoing, confident, and had a life that seemed to shine effortlessly. And here was Oliver, shy, introverted, unsure of his place in the world. He didn't know if he could live up to what Ethan saw in him. But as he looked into Ethan's eyes, he saw sincerity. He saw vulnerability. Ethan wasn't just saying this for the sake of saying it. He meant it. I don't want to hide this anymore, Ethan added, his voice steady now. I like you, Oliver. I really do. And I'm not going to pretend I don't. Oliver's chest tightened, and for a moment he didn't know if he could speak. He wanted to respond, to say something, anything, but his words felt too big, too heavy. Finally, after a long pause, he simply nodded. Okay, he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Ethan's eyes softened, and he reached out, placing a hand gently on Oliver's. You don't have to be afraid, you know. I'm here, and I want to be with you. Oliver looked down at Ethan's hand, the warmth of his touch calming the storm of thoughts in his head. He took a deep breath and squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling the reassurance in that simple gesture. You really mean it? Oliver asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I do, Ethan replied, his voice full of conviction. It was quiet for a moment as the weight of their shared feelings hung in the air. Finally, Oliver leaned forward, hesitating, just for a second before closing the distance between them. Their lips met, soft and tentative at first, as if they were both testing the waters of this new reality. But then, as the kiss deepened, it became clear. This was real. They weren't just two people awkwardly stumbling through each other's lives anymore. They were something more. The kiss felt like the beginning of everything that had been left unsaid for so long. After a moment, they pulled away, breathless, and Oliver found himself smiling. Something that had felt impossible just a few days ago. He could see it now as clear as day. They weren't so different after all. In fact, maybe they were exactly what the other needed. That night, after a quiet dinner with James, both of them felt the weight of everything they had just admitted. It was strange, almost surreal, but it was also freeing. For the first time, there were no walls, no barriers between them. Just the simple truth that they had feelings for each other, and that was enough. As they left James's house later that evening, Ethan turned to Oliver with a look of determination. I know there's a lot we need to figure out, but I'm ready for it. I want to be with you no matter what. Oliver smiled, feeling more at peace than he had in days. Me too, he said, his voice steady now. And so they began this new chapter, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. No more hiding, no more pretending, just them, together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time Oliver didn't feel scared of it. With Ethan by his side, he felt like he could face anything. And maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. They could make it